Welcome to the UOW Climate Warrior podcast.
Before we get into it today, we just would like to acknowledge that we're gathered here on the land of the Dharawal people, and we acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, including any that are listening today.
In this week's special episode, we are addressing how different industries are tackling climate change.
This week, we have been out in the field talking to the businesses across all kinds of industries. We wanted to get the real scoop on what companies are doing right now when it comes to sustainability. Not just the buzzwords, but the actual practices and strategies they are putting into action.
We also dug into what's coming next, those future opportunities that could really get the ball rolling on reducing climate change.
So let's dive in and hear what we discovered.
So to get things started, we spoke to a large industry, which is actually quite controversial when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, I had a discussion with Anna, who is the head of diversity and inclusion at BlueScope Steel. Here's what she had to say about the company's relationship with climate change.
The steel industry has a complex relationship with climate change. On one hand, steel is a really critical material used in everything from your COLORBOND roof to infrastructure and to renewable energy technologies like wind turbines and electric vehicles. On the other hand, traditional steel making is very carbon intensive because we use coal in the production process. So our biggest challenge right now is to transform how we actually make steel without carbon emissions. And that's a technology which is yet to be developed at a large scale.
I then spoke to Anna about the steps which BlueScope are taking in order to reduce the negative environmental impact. And here is what Anna had to say.
Firstly, we've set ourselves a target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and some clear progress targets set for 2030. Importantly, the main thing we're doing is exploring emerging decarbonisation technologies. And that includes direct reduced iron using natural gas as a transitional step towards green hydrogen. But across all of our operations, we're upgrading technology and investing in solutions to reduce our environmental impact and support the whole global shift towards lower emission steelmaking.
So now going from large scale, we spoke to a smaller business in the beauty industry.
Yeah, so I talked to the CEO of a small business in the retail beauty industry. For this business, climate change and sustainability are still newly developed ideas and currently not seen as the main focus because they employ a short-term survival mindset. However, it was interesting to learn that while this business has constraints, they still try and employ initiatives to reduce climate change issues in some way. For instance, they've already looked at reducing energy consumption measures in the salon. For instance, they've switched to LED lighting, they've upgraded their salon vehicles to hybrid, and they try and reuse and recycle the water in their float tanks by refiltering every 30 minutes and in between treatments. And they've also installed solar panels at the owner's home where the majority of the washing for the beauty room is done, which reduces electricity and water consumption.
Wow, and are they working with larger stockists that are sustainable?
Yeah, they've currently partnered with a lot of brands such as Estee Lauder, Lancome, MAC, Dior, Clinique and Clarins, who are all looking at reducing the impact of the environment and also have a strong focus on sustainability.
So that's what the smaller businesses are doing. Now we're looking at Lone Bio, who are a much larger business working to fight on the climate crisis.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get to interview Guy Webb from Lone Bio, and he was happy to provide us some insight into what his company is doing to assist with climate change.
I was just wondering if you could briefly explain the company that you work for, like what your role is and what the industry you guys sort of work in.
Yeah, Cam. So Lone Bio is a agri-tech business, so we develop ways of sequestering carbon into soils for farming, for the farming industry. So grains industry in particular, wheat, barley, canola and pulse crop rotation. And we develop a fungal inoculant that we can inoculate onto the roots of those crops at sowing time, so at this time of year, and the fungus grows with the roots and helps the plant sequester carbon into the soil, so from the atmosphere through the plant down into the soil and captured there. My role, I'm the global lead agronomist for Lone Bio, so I wrangle a lot of the other agronomists and farmers and rural retail stores and extension people. So I basically just educate and network, I guess. Less of out in the paddock with a shovel digging these days.
Honestly, one of the biggest things that jumped out to us was how different these companies approach sustainability. And honestly, it mostly comes down to money.
When talking to small businesses, for them, this whole sustainability thing is a pretty new territory. They're doing the basics, but here's the reality. Being sustainable is expensive when you're small. We spoke to a company in the beauty and retail industry. They're about 85% retail, 15% beauty, and they're really trying, but every sustainable choice hits their bottom line hard.
And then you've got Lone Bio, which is completely different. These guys are trying to integrate and increase sustainability in an existing industry that already contributes a lot to carbon emissions, which is agriculture. Their entire company and research project is built around attacking carbon emissions right at the source. Climate action isn't just a part of what they do, it is what they do. It's their whole business model.
Now compare that to BlueScope. They're this massive company, right? They've got the resources to actually invest in sustainability initiatives. But there's the irony. A lot of their revenue still comes from practices that aren't exactly climate friendly. So they're in this unique position where they can afford to go green, but they're also kind of caught between their current business model and where they want to be.
So when we started looking at the connections between these companies, despite their different sizes and approaches, there were some fascinating patterns. So Alina, when you looked at BlueScope, they're thinking big picture, right?
Yeah, so they're talking about net zero emissions by 2050, exploring emerging technologies and building partnerships. It's that long-term strategic thinking that you'd expect from a major corporation.
Wow, that's really interesting. And then on the other hand, Alex, you spoke to a small beauty industry, right?
Yeah, so they focus on things like partnering with brands who have products that are to do with refilling to reduce waste, ethically sourcing materials, setting those first emission targets and reducing them.
And then on the other hand, we spoke to Lone Bio, who has some really interesting technologies that go beyond what BlueScope and the beauty industry are doing.
Yeah, so with Lone Bio, their whole business model at the moment is trying to bring these climate action goals into the future and actually try and bring this big picture down towards the common man, being those farmers out on the farms that are trying to be able to reduce their emissions while also not sacrifice any of their crop yields or anything like that. So their whole idea is if they can get this product that they've created commercialised, then they can help the farmers and they can help the environment all in one.
Okay, so we've just heard from 3 different industries, and I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about the future of these industries and what you think that they can do in terms of helping the environment and becoming more sustainable.
I think for this industry with Lone Bio, the industry they're trying to penetrate with the agricultural industry being one of the biggest carbon contributors, I think it's really exciting seeing what they're going to be able to offer to everyone and making sure that it can be beneficial to both the environment and the farmer.
And I guess coming out of your discussion with Lone Bio, what do you think industries like the beauty industry you spoke to, Alex, could do in terms of their small business structure and where they're at now?
Well, it's hard to say because the beauty industry and the agricultural industry don't seem to have too much of a crossover, but in terms of where they get their ingredients from, if they can try and start looking at getting these sustainable buyers set up so that they can get their ingredients from these sustainable buyers that are using this product, I think that would be really good.
Yeah, so the beauty industry definitely has a long way to go, similar to like other small businesses, just in terms of costs of different materials and stuff. But they're definitely they have a good starting point, you'd say?
Oh, definitely. The fact that they've already partnered with these businesses. But in thinking of like a future, I feel like maybe they could consider talking to their landlord about installing solar in the complex, or even trying to maybe advertise more about these sustainable products that they do use, because customers really want to look those sort of things now when they're buying their products.
It's a really big thing now, consumers looking for that whole green-based sustainability stuff. But also with solar and stuff like that, again, it comes down to that cost, that money thing, whether how much they're willing to spend and how much the landlord is willing to spend to help them to put this solar panel thing in.
Exactly.
It's really expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Similar to BlueScope, they're such a large corporation, it'll be quite expensive to integrate new technologies and invest in new ways to transform the business.
Inevitably, all these businesses have to become sustainable at some point. So it's just, I guess, the practices that they can implement now and the future direction of these practices. I think having these goals in place is very important, and we can see the impacts of climate change already, and they're only going to worsen, unfortunately. So whatever they're doing now needs to progress in some sort of way.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Climate Warrior podcast. We hope you have taken something away and have found it engaging. For more, please follow us on all our socials linked in the bio, and we will see you next week. Bye.